Yo, it's Trivelli, I'm back, and today I'm going to be breaking down every single possible scenario for Cincinnati to actually make the college football playoff and throw a monkey wrench in this committee system. So if you can, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get this channel out to as many people as possible. Also, follow me on Instagram and Twitter so you get my daily notifications for when I'm dropping videos, which is going to be Monday through Friday, because I'm never slacking. Now, let's jump into the action.
I'm living life like this. Maybe give a little glimpse, maybe give a little glimpse.
So, Desmond Ridder and this Cincy team has been rolling on offense and actually especially on defense this year, and they've been putting a monkey wrench in the CFP system, just like I said before, for the last 2 years now, forcing the committee to possibly talk about an expansion. Now, a 4-0 start with wins over Indiana and Notre Dame on the road shows that they have not only beat the teams in the P5, but they have most definitely outperformed their schedule and counterparts that surround them in that 6 to 10 range. Here's the full picture. They score 38, they allow 14, they play P5 teams, and they send them out of the CFP conversation. Ridder has 9 touchdowns to 2 interceptions and has 100 yards rushing as well to go along with those 3 rushing touchdowns. This guy is definitely giving them life offensively, very versatile, and has improved his overall QBR by 10 points so far this year. So again, they're playing against top 10 talent in Notre Dame, and he still looked pretty good. On defense, good luck throwing it against them. They have 8 interceptions in 4 games, and that's big time, especially if you're going to be playing, top 10 quarterbacks in the college football playoff like Bryce Young. Don't forget that they were holding Notre Dame to a goose egg 17-0 going into the fourth quarter. That is where we stand with Cincy's resume. Overwhelmingly good enough thus far. Now, so we saw another crazy week of college football with Kentucky beating Florida and Oregon now pretty much out of the conversation for college football playoff as long as another team goes undefeated and or wins their championship game with 1 loss, like a Big Ten team, etc. Now you have a lot of competition for that 4th spot. That's the problem for Cincinnati. Georgia, Iowa, Penn State, Oklahoma, Michigan, Michigan State, Oklahoma State, Kentucky, and even Wake Forest, if they run the table and go 13-0. Highly unlikely, but could be a possibility. Now, we're going to be getting into a bunch of scenarios here, so you guys don't have to do the math and the work. I did it for you. I just want to say before we do, the only way that they're going to make it to the playoffs, Cincinnati, is obviously if they win out number 1, and we actually want Alabama to win out and lock up that number 1 spot, and I'll get into that later. So let's start with Georgia. They have a 3-game gauntlet coming up in the SEC with number 18 Auburn on the road, Kentucky ranked number 16 undefeated at home, and then Florida. If they lose any of these games, they're in big trouble because they have Alabama waiting in that SEC championship game if Bama wins out. The only way that they screw Cincy here is if they lose to one of these teams in the regular season and pull off the upset versus Bama in the championship game. Then the SEC Racist Committee in college football will take both of them at 1 loss each. Alabama will probably fall to number 4 in this scenario. Georgia goes to number 3, and then there's going to be no room for a G5 team. So we actually need Georgia to lose a game in the regular season and then again to Alabama, thus giving them 2 losses, and that should be enough for an undefeated 13-0 Cincy team. Now, even if Georgia does make it with their only loss being close to Alabama in the SEC championship, Cincy still has a shot this way. Alabama would be number 1, of course. Georgia would probably be number 3 with their only close loss being versus Alabama. You have an undefeated big champ at number 2, and then Cincy at number 4. So it isn't over just because Georgia wins 11-1 with their only loss to Alabama. It just matters how it happens. Now, moving on to Iowa, I actually think this team is pretty much a lock to make it if they can beat Penn State this week. But in general, all of these undefeated Big Ten team scenarios are going to get very confusing, so definitely pay close attention here. Iowa goes undefeated and beats whoever makes it from the other side of the Big Ten. That is what you have to know, whether it's Michigan or Michigan State, and they lock in their spot to the CFP. But what about the other side? How does this work? Well, let's look at Penn State, who plays Iowa this week. Cincy would need Iowa to beat Penn State now, allowing Cincy to jump them for that number 4 spot, which they can then hold as long as Penn State also loses to Michigan. Then, if my previous statement is true that Iowa is going to run the table and win the Big Ten, then Penn State would have 2 losses with 1 versus Iowa and 1 versus Michigan, therefore eliminating them from the CFP conversation. But now what happens to Michigan? Undefeated and a win versus number 4 Penn State certainly jumps Cincy, right? Yes, but Cincy can still hang their hats on a Michigan State upset over Michigan in the regular season, granting Michigan a pivotal pivotal loss that would probably keep them in the 6-11 range. And also, once again, my previous scenario of Iowa beating anyone in the Big Ten championship game would grant Michigan a second loss and thus ending their season, even if they got to the Big Ten championship game. But wait, Trivelli, what about Michigan State? They beat Michigan, who beat Penn State. They surely have a better team than Cincy, right? Yes, but they will lose their final game of the season to Penn State on the road, who will also be a two-loss team at this point. So then if Michigan State loses to Penn State and Ohio State, they are a two-loss team. Or if they do not lose to Ohio State, but then lose to Iowa in the Big Ten champ, they are out either way. Ohio State loses to Michigan this year for the first time in Michigan. I'm calling that now. And if that happens, they are two losses already and they are out. So there is plenty of time for these teams to beat each other up and basically eradicate one another from the playoffs. Iowa is just lucky to be West with the rest of the losers in the Big Ten. The East has to beat each other up, and then Cincy will be fine. Now, Oklahoma, this is tricky. They have definitely underperformed compared to Cincy, and the rankings show it with Cincy at 5 and Oklahoma undefeated at 6. This is huge because the Sooners have been so bad stopping mediocre teams like Tulane and K-State that if they meet a top 5 team, it can get very ugly. They average 38 points on offense as well, just like Cincy with Spencer Rattler, but they give up 5 more points a game at 19 against 0 teams in the top 25. So I am not saying if they go undefeated, they won't scout that spot from the Bearcats, but I believe a loss versus Texas this week or at Oklahoma State is a definite possibility based on their performances thus far. One loss Oklahoma, you're out. Okay, Kentucky, Oklahoma State, and Wake Forest all have pretty similar scenarios here. Win out and they take the spot from Cincy. But do you honestly believe if your life was on the line, you have to have all of these teams win out, Wake, Kentucky, and Oklahoma State? Would you take that bet? I wouldn't. I honestly believe Cincy getting such a high preseason ranking is what ultimately gave them this opportunity. Teams like Clemson, Ohio State, and Notre Dame, the blue bloods of this century, are all out of the picture, and it's only week 6. So this is why making this video is so much fun for me. The committee will have many decisions to make if they have, let's say, Alabama number 1, Iowa number 2, Georgia number 3, and an 11-1 team that's only losses to Alabama by 7 or less. And then you have Cincinnati, 13-0 with a win at Notre Dame, or a bunch of conference losers who have 1 to 2 losses. And I am truly sorry, Coastal Carolina fans and BYU fans. I absolutely love your programs and what you guys have been doing, but the strength of schedule this year is just not up to par. We just have to wait for expansion for these teams to see their day of glory. And honestly, guys, there's a lot of things that can happen for Cincinnati to get that number 4 spot, and there's also a lot of things that could pretty much take them out of the equation. So we'll see what happens. If you guys agree with this video overall, go ahead and like this so I can get this out to more people. You know the deal. I thank you guys so much every single video for doing that for me. It really helps. I really appreciate it. This is just such a great community that we're building here, and I want to see it grow even more. So have a great day, guys. Peace.
I'm living life like this. Maybe give a little glimpse, maybe give a little glimpse.